Nations might look hopeless right now, but on the upside, the world has seen worse already. But the question stays, what will it take to restore peace in the West Asia? How can the region return to its normal? There is no silver bullet to fix this conflict, but a few steps would help. And the first and the most pressing one is this. Good afternoon, this is the Ambassador. With me, your Ambassador, Jennifer Macau. And now as we continue on ways to restore peace on West Asia, a ceasefire in Gaza would be a key factor. The fighting has been ongoing for more than 6 months. It has killed over 30,000 Palestinians, and that's one of the root problems here. Israel has set itself a very ambitious goal in Gaza, that is to eliminate the Hamas. But experts say that could be impossible. Just to consider the current situation, Israel spent months fighting in the streets of the northern Gaza, but they have moved south, which gives Hamas more time to reorganize. Reports state that they are re-establishing themselves in the north. Plus, Israel's army could be overstretched. They've spent 6 months in the urban war zones, and now they face threats from Iran and Hezbollah. So Israel needs to take a call. Do they go with the invasion of Rafah, or do they focus on the north? Or do they pursue a ceasefire? Because one thing is very clear. The current strategy is not working, and Israel is nowhere getting the hostages back. Dozens of them are already presumed dead, so a ceasefire is in the need of the hour. It would reduce the pressure on the Israel government, and it would also put focus back on Israel, that is Arab-Israel normalization, which takes us to step number 2. That is more communication and shuttle diplomacy. This is a very important step during conflicts. If communication is not clear, there will be miscalculations, and miscalculations can lead more to conflicts. I'll give you 2 examples from this standoff. First, before Israel struck on Iran consulate in Syria, reports stated they told no one about it, not even Americans. Only moments before the attack did they attack Washington. Did they alert Washington? That too was not to discuss, but to inform that they were going to strike. And now officials are regretting it. They say the attack was a miscalculation. The second example is before Iran's response. Tehran stated they informed US about the impending attack. Look what happened. 99% of the drones were shot down. So communication and calculation is a major key. Sometimes the very conflicts, they avert conflicts. And sometimes they can minimize the impact. But Netanyahu doesn't seem interested. So far, he's ignored his associates and partners in all the stages, whether it's the Gaza war or the war in Lebanon, and now in Iraq, which brings us to the third step, a possible rejig in Israel. Netanyahu's popularity is nearing the rock bottom. Around 76% of the Israelis want him to resign. And you can see why. He has no plans to get the hostages back. He has already and seemingly started an endless war in Gaza. He has triggered a conflict with Iran, and he has alienated his Western allies. So perhaps Netanyahu has to go. Perhaps a new leadership can give Israel a fresh start. Someone who can heal the country, someone who can reassure Israel allies, which brings us to the step number 4. American policy must change. Right now, it is rooted in hypocrisy. The Americans give military aid to billions to Israel. Israel uses that to flatten Gaza. Then the same America offers humanitarian aid to Gaza. How does this policy make sense? And finally, step number 5, probably the most important of them all, a 2-state solution. Palestine must become a sovereign country because it would trigger a chain reaction. Saudi Arabia would likely recognize Israel. Armed Palestinian groups would lose their rallying call. Armed Palestinian groups would lose their rallying call, and a strong Arab-Israel alliance could emerge, one that can surely deter Iran. This looks like a long shot right now, but it is also a sure shot, and some of these steps cannot wait because the events of this week have created a new equation in West Asia. Iran says it could renew its nuclear doctrine. Publicly, Tehran has ruled about making a bomb. We are talking of a nuclear bomb. But a review could change that. The regime could actively pursue a bomb. And the same with Gaza. An offensive in Rafah would be deeply traumatic. It would force Arab states to abandon Israel completely. So it is time for the essence of Israel. It needs to think beyond ego and narrow political gains. It needs to think about its future. Does it want to be surrounded by enemies and rivals forever, or does it want to live in peace? But the question still remains, are these steps possible? What if the state of Israel doesn't consider any of these options and these initiatives can't work? Are we talking of a major combat here or the devastation of Israel? Well, that's a topic for another day. We'll talk more about it. Efficient food systems are being touted as key to tackling the alarming issue of food waste. We have moved on to Kenya, highlighted by the vast open-air dump site in the Eastern African, that is the Dandora area. Here within heaps of plastic, glass, and other refuse, food waste is not only a sign of environmental mismanagement, but also a means of survival for many. Here is more.
We scavenge the food that comes here and sell it to pig farmers. Per day I can make around 300 Kenyan shillings, and I'm grateful because I'm able to pay my rent and educate my kids and feed them. The food waste should continue coming here because without it we won't have work.
Food waste is a critical component that has to be addressed for any nation around the world to be able to achieve food and nutrition security. This is something that has to be addressed from the farmers because statistics around the globe has shown that around 811 million people go hungry because of lack of food. A third of the food that is produced around the world goes to waste because of various other losses in the food systems.
Despite the fact that food waste has really been on the top of the global agenda for quite a few years now, it has its own Sustainable Development Goal target, and that's been in place since 2015. So that's 9 years that countries and companies have had a real target to halve food waste. Little progress is being made, actually. So there needs to be a kind of a concerted effort when it comes to, of course, dealing with food waste, because food waste in some ways is a symptom of an unsustainable food system.
Local groups and officials in Mali are calling for the release of more than 110 people kidnapped by suspected jihadists some 6 days ago. According to the reports, 3 buses carrying civilians were stopped by a group in the center of the country and forced to head towards a forest between the Badiagara and the Bankas. Let's get the report. An elected official from Badiagara, who requested to remain anonymous for security reasons, stated that the buses and the passengers were still being held captive. Since 2012, Mali has been plagued by the fighting between the different factions affiliated to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group, as well as the self-declared defense forces and bandits. The worsening security situation has been compounded by a humanitarian and political crisis, with the violence spilling over into neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger, with the 3 countries witnessing military regime seize power in recent years. And in a sobering report presented to the United Nations Security Council on Tuesday, the UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflicts, Pramila Patten, revealed a disturbing trend. She delivered a grim assessment to the Security Council, disclosing that instances of sexual violence during conflict surged by a staggering 50% in 2023 compared to the previous year. Here is the report.
Finding a child to sexually abuse in a conflict zone can cost less than $1. This is the gruesome truth presented before the United Nations Security Council meeting on women, peace, and security. Women and girls are continuing used as objects of pleasure, with sexual violence in conflict increased by 50% in 2023. The UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, Pramila Patten, delivered a stark message to the Security Council on revealing a troubling surge in wartime sexual violence.
This year's report, Mr. President, highlights an unprecedented level of lethal violence used to silence survivors in the wake of sexual assault. In 2023, reports of rape victims being subsequently killed by their assailants surfaced in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Myanmar, demonstrating the need to strengthen forensic capabilities, investigations, and accountability processes that ensure the protection of victims and witnesses.
The reports, based on the United Nations verified cases, documented over 3,000 incidents of rape and sexual violence in conflict zones in 2023. Shockingly, 95% of these cases involved women and girls. Children accounted for 32% of the victims, with girls comprising 98% of this group. Addressing the council, Niemat Ahmadi, president of the Darfur Women Action Group, emphasized the gravity of the situation in Sudan, where he called for accountability for perpetrators and urged the council to take action.
It is worth noting that without the spread of weapons, the levels of sexual violence we are currently seeing in Sudan would never have occurred. As the point of expert reported to you, the warring parties in Sudan and their external enablers have continued to violate the Security Council arms embargo on Darfur.
The 15th annual report on sexual violence in conflict covers 21 situations of concern, including Israel and Gaza, Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, 50% is quite alarming, isn't it? We hope a quick solution can be found. And moving on to Haiti. In Haiti, the health system tugs on the brink of collapse as medicine runs critical low and gangs tighten their grip on the capital Port-au-Prince. Life-saving medication and equipment are now becoming scarce across hospitals and clinics, exacerbating the already fragile healthcare infrastructure. Here is more.
He has had a fever for almost 10 days. He suffers from sickle cell disease and malaria. The doctors saw him, but I still don't know what is going to be done next.
We received, for example, around 700 patients last month in the emergency department, and about 10% of those were wounded by bullets. What we see is that people have great difficulties getting to the hospital when they're wounded. People are often arriving late because the situation is simply too dangerous for them to come to the hospital, and that makes it much more difficult to treat their wounds.
And that international news brings us to our first break. There's more coming up for you. Next, we'll talk about the Niger protest against the U.S. military presence that is in the nation, Northern Gaza humanitarian aid, and the G7 committed to de-escalate the tensions, and the Burundi Talitha Kumi project, Victory Over Autism. We have this and more lined up for you shortly after the break. May you stay tuned with us.
So through the four gospel books, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, John, we can know the heart of Jesus in depth.
그리고 우리가 소위 느끼는 그 예수님을 성경을 통해 느낄 수 있어서 너무 감사합니다.
And the Jesus that we feel him through the scriptures, and I'm very thankful about that. Jesus Christ came to this earth for our
죄를
sins.
지셨고
He carried our sins,
십자가에 못 박혀 죽어 죄의 형벌을 당하셨고
and he was crucified, and he received the punishment for sins,
무덤에 들어가셨다가
and he was put into the tomb
사흘 만에 부활하셨습니다.
and resurrected in 3 days.
이것이 우리가 말하는 복음입니다.
This is the gospel that we speak,
예수님께 우리 죄를 위해 죽으신 이야기.
about how Jesus died for our sins. The purpose of Jesus being
우리
crucified,
죄를 담당하기 위하여 십자가에 못 박혀 죽으셨습니다.
he was crucified to pay for our
그래서
sins.
예수 십자가에 못 박혀 죽으심으로 우리 죄가 분명히 씻어졌는데
And through Jesus being crucified, clearly our sins have been washed clean.
참 안타깝게도 많은 사람은 여전히 죄인이라고 말합니다.
However, unfortunately, many people still say that they are sinners.
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back. You are still watching the GBS Ambassador Global, and we are glad to have you join us today. Now, as we continue, tensions have been mounting in Niger as protests against the presence of the U.S. troops in the nations intensify, demanding their immediate departure, especially in the northern Niger. Despite the U.S. stating its intention to withdraw their forces from the region, this comes as the U.S. announced the plans to initiate discussions about the withdrawal process. However, the concrete timeline had not been provided for the troop pull-out. Listen in. Hundreds of people demonstrated on Sunday in the northern Niger, calling for the immediate departure for the 1,000 American troops that are based there. The demo happened even as the U.S. stated that it will begin its plans to withdraw troops from Niger. A U.S. official stated there was no timeline to withdraw. Besides, talks set to start in the coming days about the next steps.
We can confirm that discussions have begun between the United States and Niger for the orderly withdrawal of U.S. forces from the country. In the near future, the Department of Defense will provide a small delegation from the Pentagon and U.S. Africa Command to participate in those discussions.
The official spoke on condition of anonymity to detail the private diplomatic discussions as an American delegation to coordinate the details of the withdrawal process will be dispatched soon.
We'll continue to work with regional partners to address how best to ensure that we can continue to do the kinds of things we do to not only protect our national interests, but also look at the collective security of regional partners.
Niger plays a central role in the U.S. military operations in Africa's Sahel region, an area on the edge of the Sahara Desert. Washington is concerned about the spread of the jihadi violence, where local groups have pledged the allegiance to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State groups. Earlier this month, Russian military trainers arrived to reinforce the country's air defenses, and with Russian equipment to train the Nigerians to use. There was an attempt on behalf of the U.S. to revise the military agreement with Niger that would allow the U.S. officials to stay. But the agreement between Zain and Campbell stated that the efforts had failed. In the midst of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, humanitarian aid was witnessed being parachuted into the Gaza Strip. The aid drop coming through the satellite photos revealing the construction of a new compound of tents near the Khan Yunis in Gaza, signaling a potential escalation in the Israeli military plans, an offensive targeting the city of Rafah. Ivy Maven with the report.
Humanitarian aid was airdropped over the Gaza Strip on Tuesday, captured on video by the Associated Press from southern Israel. The airdrops comes from satellite photos appear to show a new compound of tents being built near Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip as the Israeli military continues to signal its plan an offensive targeting the city of Rafah. Israel has said it plans to evacuate civilians from Rafah during an anticipated offensive from the southern city, where hundreds of thousands of people have taken refuge during the war. On Saturday, the U.S. House of Representatives approved a $26 billion aid that includes around $9 billion in humanitarian assistance for Gaza, which experts say is a brink of famine, as well as billions for Israel. War was sparked by the unprecedented October 7th raid in southern Israel, in which Hamas and other militants killed around 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and abducted around 250 hostages. Israel says militants are still holding around 100 hostages and the remains of more than 30 others. The Israel-Hamas war has killed more than 34,000 Palestinians, and according to local health officials, at least 2/3 of them are children and women. It has devastated Gaza's two largest cities and left a swath of destruction, and around 80% of the terrorist population has fled to other parts of the besieged coastal enclave. Ivy Maven, GBS News.
Quite a scene, and in a press conference following a group of the seven, we are talking of the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Capri, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken refuted any U.S. involvement in the alleged Israeli attack on Iran. He also addressed the U.S. stance on a full UN membership for Palestine, asserting that the timing wasn't conducive and the granting state recognition to the territories wasn't ready yet. Here is more. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken denied U.S. involvement in the alleged Israel attacks on Iran during a press conference following a group of G7 foreign ministers meeting in Capri on Friday. According to media reports, Iranian officials claimed there were no plans to respond, adding that the foreign source had not been confirmed and the country had not received any external attack, while Israel did not comment on the issue.
First, the G7 condemned the unprecedented Iranian attack on Israel, unprecedented in scope and scale. Scope because it was a direct attack on Israel from Iran, scale because it involved more than 300 munitions, including ballistic missiles. We're committed to Israel's security. We're also committed to de-escalating, to trying to bring this tension to a close.
Friday reports came as Israel suggested it could retaliate after Tehran launched hundreds of drones and missiles at the country last weekend. That action itself came as a response to the alleged Israeli airstrike on Iranian consulate in Damascus on April 1st, which Israel has not accepted responsibility for. Israel's Western allies repeatedly warned against further strikes, although Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made it clear that they will make their own decisions.
But as I said, we're committed to working to achieve a Palestinian state with the necessary guarantees for Israel's security. And we've been working on that, including as part of the potential normalization process between Israel and Saudi Arabia, something that we've intensely engaged on over the last several months and weeks.
Blinken also defended the U.S. veto on full UN membership for Palestine at the UN Security Council, stating that this is not the time to grant the territories the state of recognition.
Also, take a look at the G7 statement today, which shows unity on this question. It says that there's going to be a proper time, a rightful time for recognition. This is not that time. We need to do the diplomacy. We need to do the hard work to bring parties together, to bring the region together, and to demonstrate that there's a much better future that awaits everyone if they follow this path.
Now, have you ever heard of autism? Maybe sometimes you feel sidelined, you feel there's no hope, and you don't know the solution. Well, I have an encouraging story for you from Burundi, a country where understanding of autism is still in its infancy. One woman's determination has been breaking barriers and changing lives. Meet Alice, a mother of 3, one of whom is autistic. She, like many other patients in Burundi, faced stigma and misunderstanding when it came to her autistic child, but she chose to have a different path. Maven with the report.
Autism is still little known in Burundi, and autistic children are often hidden away and accused of being spoiled, capricious, or possessed. Some rare parents, however, understand this situation and support their children, as does Alice, a mother of 3, one of whom is autistic. Few parents understand this. It takes patience and courage. Some parents get discouraged and hide their children, hiring people to look after them in their bedrooms. The Talitha Kum Center aims to break the taboo, and the name in Hebrew means get up and walk, and it helps children to learn and develop. Talitha Kum aspires to be a center of excellence on autism.
It's about care adopted to the child. The second objective is to support families. The third is to raise awareness throughout the child's environment.
Dr. Melissa of Sensory Integration Department says the disorder is not really an illness and requires early diagnosis. The center was recently chosen as the driving force behind a race between Bujumbura and the Rwanda's capital, Kigali, organized by cyclists from Zinduka Club.
Diagnosis really plays an essential role in the management of autism. First and foremost, for the children concerned, it enables them to benefit from early and appropriate care, which will improve their skills.
An opportunity to increase public awareness about autism and raise funds to support the center. Created in 2020, the Talitha Kum Center has already screened around 200 children, and only around 20 of them are cared for at the center. Ivy Maven.
Wow, what an encouraging story, Talitha Kum. They prove to us that courage knows no boundary, and instead they choose to make the difference, setting an example for us to learn. And that international news brings us to the end of our ambassador, GBS Global News. It's been a pleasure having you on board, joining us to the end. And just to do a recap for you, today we've talked about the discussions, possible ways in which West Asia could restore peace. Will a ceasefire be possible, or is it by the resignation of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, or maybe declaring a two-state option? These were among the ways we've talked about of the tackling of the situation, and if these avenues fail, what are the dangers lying ahead? We'll keep you updated more on this development as you keep it locked with us. And in Niger, tensions have been escalating lately, pertaining the presence of the U.S. troops in the nation, demanding of their immediate departure, especially in the northern Niger. U.S. has stated of its intentions to withdraw their forces from the region, but this was complicated by more of the Russian troops' presence in the region. How will this unfold? We'll keep you updated more. Keep it locked on GBS at Ambassador. And Haiti, we are talking of the health system here. They seem to near collapse, while the G7 has been looking for ways to de-escalate tensions, especially in West Asia. May you keep it locked at the Ambassador as we keep you updated with the latest developments. I've been your Ambassador, Jennifer Macau, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at Ambassador GBS Global tomorrow, same time, same place, from Monday to Friday, 8:1 p.m. And may you all have a superb and the most beautiful and a wonderful afternoon.
Everywhere, GBS.